My name is Danny Cortez. I live in Los Angeles County, California. I was ordained in the Southern Baptist Convention, and so I pastored a Southern Baptist church for about 15 years until we were disfellowshipped by the Southern Baptist Convention. And so for the past few years, I've been pastoring independent churches. So my wife and I have 4 children. And in 2013, we had a 15-year-old son who came out to us as gay. And so that was quite a bit of a surprise for us. Yeah, Drew was always just a really outgoing, playful, just happy person. He was, at the time when he was 15, dating a girl. And so that's why I didn't expect anything. But after he came out, he actually said, she was my beard. And I guess a beard meant she was someone that he was pretending to be straight with. But yeah, he was always such the center of attention. But I remember after he came out, unfortunately, this religious community we were a part of pretty much started abandoning him, and he was left isolated. His best friends walked away from him, and so yeah, that was a really hard process, and just watching that unfold. Yeah, I mean, since he came out, I think in the beginning he was blaming a lot of things on himself. Our church went through just a really difficult process, and because he was at the center of it, he felt like it was all his fault. But I think that process, and our coming alongside him and telling him, Drew, this is not your fault. This is really the church's fault for not understanding how to love LGBTQ people. I feel like ever since he came out back in 2013, it's almost 9 years now. He's become so much stronger. He's become such a fierce advocate for all things related to justice. And he has just become such this incredibly strong person and now unafraid to speak for himself. Remember before, he was so timid, he was so shy, he was so afraid almost. But now it's we can't keep him from being quiet. He's he will speak his mind and he'll stand up for himself. And I'm just so proud of him and just what he's become. Coming from a very conservative background, our family was very traditional. I was the head of the home. My wife was the wife that was supposed to be submissive to the husband. A lot of things changed, after my son came out. We started thinking about all the problems with patriarchy, along the problems of sexism in the church and all of that. And I think for us, our son's coming out and just hearing more of his story helped us to see how many things we were not understanding about people, especially sexual minorities who have been, not understood. And I think as we started paying more attention to his journey, and him being very vocal about some of the trauma that he experienced in conservative, Christian spaces, we began to see that we were actually perpetuating a lot of the harm, through the way we were raising him, through the way I was even teaching as a pastor. And so I like to say that, our son helped open our eyes. And, it's kind of reverse, right? A lot of times it's the parents that are supposed to teach the kids. And so what we found, my wife and I, is that our relationship to our child began to change, and that we had to humble ourselves and become more aware that we were in the wrong. We were the ones that weren't parenting well. We weren't loving our child the way, he needed to be loved, and there was a lot of adjustments that needed to be made. And so, yeah, I think, our relationship became a lot stronger because it wasn't this patriarchal, we know what's best for you and you just listen to us and, pay attention to our rules and, and all of that and everything will be okay. Instead, I think our kids, and not just our son Drew, but all of our kids, helped my wife and I develop more of a posture of listening. And what I think we're learning is so much of the younger generation has become so much more aware of discrimination, of homophobia, transphobia, biphobia. They have the language for it. They have the friendships, that are constantly informing, those relationships. And those of us who are my age and my wife's age, we didn't grow up with all of that. And so we had to be educated. We had to do the hard work of trying to figure out the things we were never taught. And so, yeah, I think our relationship with our kids became more respectful. It became more, we had to confess, that there was a lot of things that we, raised our kids with that were just not healthy and they weren't right. And so it was, really a process of repentance for us. So I was ordained in 1993 as a Southern Baptist pastor. And as a pastor of a conservative church, the Southern Baptist denomination is the second largest Christian denomination in the U.S., just second to Catholicism. And as a conservative denomination, we always were told to pray the gay away, that God's intention was for one man, one woman, in a monogamous relationship. And so whenever someone in my church came out, we were always, trying to get them to change or get them to stay celibate. And my understanding of God at the time was this is what God wanted, that God wanted this, kind of marriage, and that to try to pray the gay away was actually to try to help someone, to help them not fall into sin, to help them not go to hell, and all of that. And so as a Southern Baptist church, we even had a fund to send people to conversion therapy to try to get them to change their orientation. But I kind of started figuring out early on that the people who were coming out to me, LGBTQ people, weren't changing at all. In fact, they were getting worse. There was suicidal ideation, there was self-harm, there was just a lot of depression, sadness, anxiety, panic attack. And I felt as a church, we're supposed to be helping people, but why is there one segment in the church where we're literally making them worse? And they got me really questioning why, if we're supposed to be helping people, why is it that every single LGBTQ people in our church doesn't seem to be served by our church? And so, I started coming alongside a lesbian college student more closely, and she was asking me to hold her accountable, to be celibate. After about a year, she said, "Danny, I can't do this anymore. I think, God changed, I've changed my mind. I think God accepts me for who I am." And she actually left our church with one of the other women at our church. And I was like, you know what? Why do you have to leave? Why can't you stay? And I knew the answer. And they told me, Danny, you know why we can't stay. We wouldn't be allowed to teach Sunday school again. Our relationship wouldn't be affirmed. But I did have a deep care for them. But they challenged me and they said, "Danny, we know you've been waiting to study like the theology around same-sex relationships for some time. Will you finally like, you know, devote yourself to it? And so I accepted it. I said, yes, I will like read every book. I will do everything I can. And so I like accepted the challenge. And I went to the university I graduated from. I looked up every document in antiquity that, you know, talked about same-sex relationships. And I remember just feeling like overwhelmed and realizing that, you know, our understanding of homosexuality is so different from what it was back then. And then I started diving into the scriptures more and just realizing that, you know, I think we misunderstood, you know, this sacred text of ours. And especially getting to know more people in the LGBTQ people who left the church that were like really harmed and traumatized. And just putting all those pieces together, it took about 5 years, but I got to the place where I remember I was at the beach and I was telling myself, or a thought came in my head, I don't think I believe what I used to believe. I think gay, lesbian, trans people are perfect and beautiful, and God made them just the way they are. And I remember just being like excited that went in my mind. But then a moment later, I remember being fearful that, oh my God, like, you know, I could lose my job over this. But I kind of kept it a secret because I wasn't sure what to do with that thought. But there was about maybe 2 weeks later where I was in the car with my son Drew, who again was 15 years old at the time. And there was a song on the radio that came on that was very gay affirming. And I asked my son, Drew, who sings this song? And he told me, and he asked me why. And I said, well, I like the song. And he looked at me back and he said, Dad, do you know what the song's about? And I said, yeah, I think that's why I like it. And he looked so puzzled. And so when we got out of the car in this parking lot, I looked at him and I said, why, Drew, what do you think of the song? And he looked back at me and he said, Dad, I'm gay. And I was like, wait, what? I had been like, and I told him, Drew, you know, I've been like studying about this for the past like 5 years. I've been going to West Hollywood and had all these books, you know, in our house laying around. And he said, Dad, it wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt like if I had confessed to you, I would have given up because, Dad, I don't want to be gay. And that, like, you know, caused me to like really think more about my own faith and why is it that my son isn't accepting himself. And so he finally came out to the rest of the family, my wife, later that week. And then I remember, you know, he has 3 other siblings, and all 6 of us were in the car. And he said to us, I'm so glad that I'm finally out. But I want you to know that if there was a pill that someone could give me that could take away my gayness, I would still take it. I remember just listening to him, like, you know, share openly about what he was going through. And something about it bothered me, so that the next day I went up to him when it was just me and him. I said, Drew, I've been thinking about what you said. I want you to know that if there was a pill that I could give you that would change who you are, I wouldn't give it to you. Because, Drew, this is who God made you to be. You're beautiful, you're perfect just the way you are, and I love you for who you are. And when I said that to him, you know, we embraced, and I remember thinking, this is the first time I've ever spoken to a gay man where I felt like I wasn't pronouncing death on him. That I was actually like saying something that was actually supportive and, you know, allowing my son to live. And that really like became a turning point for me. Like, you know, it caused me to think that this is what God would say to every LGBTQ person. And so, yeah, it like really changed my idea of God, and it just made me like realize that I have been harming every single person who has come out to me in this church. And so it caused me to like write a letter to every person that I could think of that ever came out to me, like in the past 15 years. And just to tell them, hey, you came out to me, you wanted to trust me, and you wanted like someone to care for you. And I just want to say that like, I didn't care for you the way you needed to be cared for. What I said to you was harmful. It was wrong, and I am so sorry for what I've done. And so, yeah, I think, in this process, God like really showed me that the God that I was like believing in terms of like, LGBTQ people, I was so off. I mean, it was so harmful, the things that I had taught, the way I practiced my faith. And so like, yeah, I think, my son and other LGBTQ people helped me open my eyes. It taught me, LGBTQ people taught me how to love. They taught me how to like stop being so hateful and harmful. And so in a sense, LGBTQ people helped save me from my own like hurtful ways that I've been like inflicting on so many people. Yeah, so I'm so thankful for that. I had a lot of fears when Drew came out. I had fears because, the community we were a part of, we didn't know anyone else who had a gay child. And so we didn't know who to turn to, if Drew's friends would accept him. And so, yeah, I had fears around my job. And, those fears, were beginning to come to fruition because our son decided to do a coming out video that he posted on YouTube. And this was like before, like I had announced to my church that I had become affirming in my theology. And so he posted the video on like February 7 or something. And then I told the church on February 9 that I had changed my position. And in fact, I told the elders of the church that I had changed my position a few days before because I knew Drew was coming out with his video. And in that meeting with the elders like moved to terminate me as the pastor of the church. I was the founding pastor. But they said, we don't want to terminate you until the church knows why, we're moving to terminate you. And so they said, you have this Sunday to tell the church what you now believe so that after the church, we can have a congregational meeting and take a vote, basically, to like terminate you as pastor. And so I gave like a long sermon because I thought I was gonna get fired anyway. I gave like a 1-hour sermon. And that's when the rest of the church, after that message, the rest of the congregation basically told the elders, why are you trying to move so fast? The past 5 years, Danny has been sharing his journey with us. Maybe God has something to tell us through Danny. And so it was actually voted, a vote was taken to have a discernment process in the church. So for the next 5 months, we had people on both sides, invited to the church, basically, to like, for a discernment process. I was actually told I couldn't speak anymore during that process. So I was told like, okay, for the next 5 months, you're not allowed to teach. The other thing that happened was Drew, who was a Sunday school teacher, was also not allowed to teach Sunday school. So they were already treating us as like people who were, heretics. But the interesting thing was at the end of the 5 months, 60% of the church chose to become third way. And 40% chose to remain conservative. And by third way, we meant back at that time, we meant that we will allow any pastor, to practice what they believe. And so an affirming pastor like me would be allowed to officiate same-sex weddings. And so that was I couldn't believe here was a Southern Baptist church that actually allowed their pastor to officiate same-sex weddings. A month later, one of my friends actually found out and said, "Will you officiate my wedding?" He was a gay man, and so I officiated his wedding. And then about 2 months later, the denomination of Southern Baptist, began the dismissal process for our church. And so I flew over to Nashville, and for 2 days, I went before the committee, and they asked me all sorts of questions. But it was 83-0, where all 83 executive directors of the Southern Baptist Convention voted to remove our church, New Heart Community Church, from the denomination. And so, there were a lot of ramifications, fears that were realized. I said earlier that my son Drew, had some close friends that said, "Drew will always love you no matter what." Unfortunately, there was a lot of pressure from their parents that they basically told their children they couldn't be friends with Drew anymore. And slowly but surely, one by one, all his friendships, were basically lost. And that was just a really hard time for us. I watched Drew, who used to be the center of attention, who was the life of the party, who had so many friends, all of a sudden had no friends. He just, spiraled down. He got really sick. He got hospitalized, for a long time. And that was just a really difficult time for our family. It was just so unbearable watching Drew in so much pain. But I know through it, he was able to become stronger. And I just really admire him for his strength and his perseverance through it. He has no reservations anymore. He fully embraces who he is. He is surrounded by such a beautiful community. He has close friendships. And so he's just a remarkable person. Just really thankful for him. My son Drew wanted to go to a Christian college still. So he went to Seattle Pacific University. And during that time, he's continued to experience, a lot of homophobia, and just got him to question so much of, what he was raised to believe. And he told my wife and I that he no longer identifies as Christian. And it's a decision we totally respect. We totally understand. And that doesn't change, anything in terms of our admiration and respect for him. Since my son came out in 2013, there's a lot of things I think I could have done better. I think, because I was so shell-shocked by so many people walking away from us, Drew's friends, our best friends, no longer speak to us. There was a lot of, church leaders that I had looked up to that, were mentors of mine. And I remember just being so surprised by how much attention we were getting nationally. That I chose to remain silent when I could have been speaking up more. And I think I would have been more vocal as an ally. If given another chance, I would have not been so concerned about hurting people's feelings, of rocking the boat, because I think this is so important that we need to speak the truth. and we need to be like able to share what we can. um, the other thing I think that I'm still trying to process actually is I think one of the things in terms of trying to understand what it means to be a good ally is trying to understand like my role in this conversation, and like how do I stay in my lane and not center like myself in these conversations. And so there were there's times where I think I could have done a better job in that, in trying to elevate LGBTQ voices above my own. And so yeah, I think I like now have tried to remain and so this is kind of a side thing. I think there are too many cis heterosexual men, especially, who are trying to use what's happening now to create fame for themselves. um, and so they're writing books, about this and everything. When I'm like, I think we need to pay attention to LGBTQ people more than we do cis hetero people. And so I feel comfortable like staying in my lane as a parent, having this conversation with you, because like, I'm a parent of an LGBTQ child. And I think it's important for parents to learn from other parents. And so I think this is like an important conversation that like, we can have here. But I think a lot of times people are still so used to paying attention to authority figures in the church who are cisgender heterosexual men. And it's time that the church learns to like center the voices of marginalized people more and hear their stories above what we've been so accustomed to. And so yeah, I think that was like a learning process for me that I wish I knew more of back then. I think the best thing my wife and I did was to listen. We were very cautious to like preach at our son, to give our son advice even. And I'm glad we did that, because I remember hearing a story of a gay man who I think was around 60 years old when we were talking. And he said, I came out to my parents when I was 18, and it's been like over 40 years. But I still remember every word they said. I still remember what they were wearing. I remember what we ate for dinner. And he said, every person who comes out remembers those kind of details. And so I tell other parents that. I tell them, you know what? The coming out of your child is like such a sacred moment that's going to be remembered. And the best thing you can do is to like listen, because one day you might regret, from even like good intentions, what you want to say to your child. Tell your child you love them, tell them you love them unconditionally, but be very careful to quote Bible verses. Be very careful to like give any advice, or especially to preach at them. And the best thing you can do, I think, is just to listen, and to listen to understand. And if there's anything that you are like having to process, find another parent who has been on the road longer than you, and process it with that parent, because there's a good chance that you will say something that will be very hurtful for your child. You might not intend it, but a lot of times our speech takes the form of microaggression, and it could be very hurtful to our child. And so listening, be present, have a posture of humility the best you can, and seek help from other parents who have been down the road a little longer than you have. When I look at my son Drew, I think, wow, what a gift, Drew, you have been to me. that you like your life has brought down so much of the stereotypes I grew up with, all the stuff I believed about gay people. You've proven to be wrong, to me, that they were wrong. And I look at you as this gift from God that enabled me to see just how beautiful and perfect you are. There's nothing wrong with you, that this is who God made you to be, and that we get to live in a world now where there is so much multifaceted beauty in the world, that there is just different diversity of expressions of the image of God. And I see that so fully in you, Drew. I'm so thankful for that. I think, one of the things, especially coming from the Christian faith, that we hold to is the teachings of Jesus, where Jesus says that the greatest commandment is to love God and to love neighbor. And I think, the way we can really show our obedience to our God is that we love people well. And I think, one of the things we have to do as parents is we have to try to figure out how to love our child well, regardless of what you might believe at this moment. I think the best thing to ask always, especially when things feel difficult, when you feel confused, is to ask the question, what does love look like? And I think that'll go a long way. And oftentimes love looks like not saying what you want to say. Love looks like supporting your child, even though it might go against your church. Love looks like standing up for your child when other people in the family are saying things that are hurtful. And so, one of the things I think, I think we can always ask ourselves is, in this difficult, confusing time where I'm still trying to figure things out, I might not have my theology all put in place, but I can at least ask the question, what does love look like right now? What action or words can I say that will allow my child to thrive, to flourish? Because that's what love looks like. And I hope that you would continue to ask yourself that question.